Hello everyone, welcome to this session on XAT decision making. I'm Dr. Ila Rathore and my experience of more than 2 decades in verbal ability tells me that decision making in XAT could easily turn out to be one of the easiest sections for you if you are aware of the few facts that have to be taken into consideration and of the strategy that is needed to solve these questions correctly. In this section, students, we are going to take a look at the different types of questions which are there in this section, as well as at the strategy to solve these different types. Now, decision making is a combination of logical reasoning and reading comprehension. Logical reasoning because you have to take the facts into consideration and without a personal bias reach a decision. And reading comprehension because so many times you'll find there is a huge amount of text that is to be read, and here I would like to add that it would be really beneficial if you are aware of management terms, business terminology, because that would really enhance your speed reading and accuracy, your comprehension. So in a typical decision making question, you are given a scenario where the protagonist is faced with a dilemma and he or she has to take a decision. Now, what kind of a situation you might be given? It could involve ethical dilemmas or a managerial issue, a financial choice, a business decision, or it could even be a personal decision. So any of these scenarios can be given. And here, before we begin, let me clearly say, just remember your moral science lessons. That's very important. You have to take textbook ethics into consideration before taking any decision here. It is not just increasing profits, but every crucial decision has to be ethical. So just keep that in mind. With this, we take a look at what kind of different questions do we get. You might get a caselet followed by multiple questions, or single questions, case-based, a best course of action kind of question where you have to tell which is the next best step, and a perspective analysis. You need to be aware that in any business decision, in any decision for that matter, many stakeholders are involved. In a business decision, you have the company, the employees, the customer. So each viewpoint has to be taken into consideration. A caselet based question would give you a case study, a case there, a passage, followed by multiple questions. Here we have one related to Mr. Dipanshu Barua, a young IT professional. And one morning when he reaches office, he finds that there is an email from Mr. Patel. And from the email, we realize that Mr. Patel is somebody very superior in their organization. And what does it have? So very importantly, Mr. Patel conveys a need for improvement in Dipanshu's behavior. And there is a need for visible improvement. And otherwise, it may warrant further action leading to dismissal. So these are the very, very important aspects of this case study. Now here, this is our first step. Whenever we get a question, whenever we get a case study, a caselet, the very first thing we do is to underline the important aspects. We have to know the core issue. Here in this question, the core issue is that his behavior is there is something lacking in his behavior and the organization is not really very happy about it, and his colleagues as well have reported against him, and it might even warrant a dismissal. So these 2-3 things are important. Now, very first thing we do is look at the question stem. The question stem says, initially the email distracted Dipanshu, but he decided to focus on the job. In that, we get broadly 2 kinds of questions. One is which asks you what is the next step of action, what is the course of action that has to be undertaken. The second is they can ask you what led the person to take this decision. And this, dear students, is that second kind of question where you have to tell which of the following options might best explain his decision. So before taking a look at the options, again I repeat, remember the core issue. The core issue is his performance is being questioned, and there is a chance that he'll be dismissed because of that. So for him, the most important thing is that the organization sees that his performance is up to the mark. So now let's look at the options. In decision making, it is important to know why a wrong option is wrong before knowing which option to mark as correct. So let's look at the first one. Mr. Patel would soon be transferred to another department. Okay. Second, last week Mr. Dipanshu has been assigned to a new team in the same project. And the third one, that 3 days back Mr. Dipanshu has been assigned a new project. Now when we look at option number 1, 2 and 3, we realize one thing, that the first one states that Mr. Patel will be transferred. That means Mr. Patel will no longer be handling this issue. But this doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be another officer handling the same issue. So in a way, the issue remains unsolved. And option number 2 and 3 again evade the issue instead of solving it. Either it's a new project or a new team. But then what about the performance? So when you are looking at the options, it's very important that you see that the important issue has been addressed or not. And here the important issue is his performance. Look at the fourth option. His friend has been hospitalized. Now, students, there'll always be an option like this one which is irrelevant, totally not related to the issue, and maybe look good because it's a soft kind of option which makes you emotional. Oh, is his friend hospitalized? But it is totally irrelevant. Failing to perform in the client meeting might further complicate things. Look at the word perform. Now we know that the core issue is performance, and this is the only option which is addressing that issue. So he needs to perform well, because failing to perform will further aggravate the situation. So the correct answer is option number 5. Let's see what's important here. The crucial steps are, very importantly, we need to look at the question stem first, because that will tell us what we are looking for exactly. Then we have to underline the core issue, the matter at hand, that is his performance. Based on that, we rule out all the irrelevant options. And just remember 2 things which are very crucial to any decision-making situation. They are the 2 C's, consequences and complexities. The consequences, the outcome of your action is very important, and the complexities of the situation in which you are involved. Taking view of these 2 things, I think you will be easily be able to reach the correct decision. Let's move on to the next question based on the very same caselet. Here the scene changes a little bit. The scheduled presentation went off smoothly. Back in his cabin, Dipanshu read Mr. Patel's email once more. Now during his last meeting, he had tried to explain, but Mr. Patel had not allowed him to speak. Dipanshu was thinking of meeting Mr. Patel again, but was doubtful whether this would help. Incidentally, he had a job offer from a startup with comparable salary. And if Dipanshu was to join the new job, he had to accept the offer within the next 2 weeks. However, he cannot think of a life without a job. This is very important. Dipanshu was confused. Understandably so. Which of the following options would be the best move for Dipanshu? This is very important. Your question stem. Before looking at the options, let's underline the core issue. The core issue is, first, should he talk to Mr. Patel or not? And second, should he take up that job offer? So how does he deal with this situation where there is this negative feedback about him? So the first option is talk to Mr. Patel and highlight the initiatives he has taken, but at the same time start applying for the jobs. Now when we look at such an option, we clearly know that it not only addresses the first issue but also the second. So both the issues are addressed. He should talk and at the same time keep looking for a job. The second option, reject the offer and in next 3 months find a better job. Now this kind of option may look good on the surface, but it doesn't address any of the issues. Neither does he resolve the issue with Mr. Patel, nor does he take up a new job. So both the issues remain unsolved. So this is what I call a totally wrong option. Beware of such options. And the third one, resign from this organization right now. Now this sounds really, maybe somebody who just feels too negative about such a situation might just opt for this. But please beware of such an option. It is a hot-headed decision. Hot-headed decisions are totally ruled out. Accept the offer only if the startup gives a salary hike. Else keep prospecting. Accept the offer with a request to give him a 10% salary hike. So with a salary hike, you go for a new job. Both option 4 and 5 talk about asking for a salary hike. Yes, they address one issue of taking up a new job. But here again, one thing is very important. This guy cannot be without a job. Job security is very important. So this startup might not provide that job security which is very essential for Dipanshu. So as such, we find that the first option is the only one which addresses both the issues. That is, he should resolve the issue with Mr. Patel and keep looking for a job. Keep looking for alternatives is very important in such a situation. So when we are faced with such a situation, the most important things to be kept in mind are, first, we have to make all possible efforts to improve the situation before taking a drastic step. So we can't just resign and go. And the second thing is, along with attempts to resolve the issue, one needs to have other options open. Very crucial with cases involving workplace tensions and a job change. So here we need to keep looking for a job. So this is what we call a plan B is a must. And the third question here, again we have an addition to the same caselet. After a couple of weeks, Mr. Patel realizes that the project leader, Mr. John, a very competent senior executive, may have willfully influenced his team members to file a wrong complaint against Dipanshu. Now, Mr. John may have done it because Dipanshu has refused to toe John's line. Mr. Patel also came to know that Dipanshu was thinking of quitting his job. He felt regretful about his letter to Dipanshu. He wanted to resolve the complicated situation. He was contemplating following 5 actions in his mind. So the important issues here are that Mr. John has to be told to mend his ways or change his tactics. Second, very importantly, that he has to make sure that Dipanshu doesn't leave the job. And third, he has to resolve this conflict, resolve this situation. Let's look at the question stem first. Which of the following is the best sequence of actions for resolving the question? Now, this is a kind of question you might get in the decision making section, where you are not just asked the course of action or the next step, you are asked the sequence of those steps. You might know that 2 or 3 steps are good, but what should be their sequence? So while solving these questions, what we need to keep in mind is priority, protocol and prudence. Not necessarily in that order, but this is very important. Prudence, as you know, is wisdom which is needed, definitely reasoning and decision making, and priority and protocol. So we need to prioritize, okay, what has to be done first. And so many times you'll find in organizations, protocol is also very important. Who we need to speak to first and who later. With this in mind, let's look at the options. The first one says, talk to Mr. John about Dipanshu and convey to him that losing a bright employee would cost the organization dearly. And the second one, catch up with Mr. John during coffee break and convey that Dipanshu has a very good track record. Now, on the surface level, both these options might look similar. That he has to just talk to John and tell him that Dipanshu is good and we need him. But when we look at it very clearly, we find that the first one states that he needs to talk to Mr. John, and very subtly he needs to tell him that the organization wishes to retain Dipanshu and it would cause the organization dearly if Dipanshu leaves. So they have given him a subtle hint that please mend your ways, please make sure that Dipanshu stays with the organization. The second option here, though it seems to talk about the same thing, but we find that it is more like Mr. Patel pleading the case of Dipanshu, which is not really a good scenario. So why should Mr. Patel be pleading the case of Dipanshu? And is there any need to tell Mr. John about the track record of Dipanshu? Because Mr. John is the project leader. He already knows about it. So this one, students, is ruled out. The third option, chat with Dipanshu during coffee break. Yes, but chat about what? This kind of an option doesn't clarify what it is about. Let's look at the fourth one, catch up with Dipanshu during coffee break and convey that the organization values. Option 4 now clarifies which is what is not there in option 3, that he should catch up with Dipanshu and tell him that we need to retain you. Now this addresses our second very important issue, that Dipanshu might be quitting the job. The third one, arrange a meeting among Mr. John, Dipanshu and himself. Okay, very good. So our third very important issue here to resolve the conflict is met here. And when we look at it, the first, fourth and fifth, they form a very good sequence. That is number 4. So first he speaks to Mr. John, then with Dipanshu, and then arranges a meeting amongst the three of them to resolve this conflict. This is the correct decision. Now the decision making section has got analytical reasoning problems as well. A very typical analytical reasoning question could be something like this. So there you have a group of 9 runners, and the runners are Ashok, Benjamin, Girish, Himani. They all finish at different times and their finishing order is as follows. Before taking this into account, let's take a look at what the question stem is. Which is the best position Girish can finish? Now, let's look at the facts they have given to us. Fanish finishes before Ashok. Okay. Divya finishes before either Benjamin or Ishan, and Iravati finishes after Chet, and Girish finishes after Ashok. Okay, good. Now this clearly tells us that Girish cannot finish before Fanish and Ashok, and they have not given us anything in relation to Girish's position and that of Divya and the rest of them. So what is mandatory is that Girish has to finish after Fanish and Ashok. So as such, the best position that Girish can finish is at third. For the analytical reasoning questions, students, it's very important that you have the basic concepts of analytical reasoning, plus you are very thorough with your basic mathematics and particularly probability, set theory and Venn diagram. So just to sum it up, what all we need to remember is we need to take all aspects into consideration, whether it's profits, expenses, employees, and yes, very, very importantly, the customers, especially when it is a business decision. And we have to avoid totally, completely any kind of personal opinions, personal biases, and we have to stick to the moral science lessons we were taught in school, the textbook ethics. Do not assume. Just as in critical reasoning and verbal reasoning, we have to stick to the facts. Very, very importantly, our decisions have to be ethical and they should lead to maximum benefit and minimum damage. And yes, right decision at the right time. Students, for a high score, you need to practice a lot and just do all the previous year's decision making questions. For any further information, just log on to Hit Bullseye. I hope you enjoyed this session and gained from it as much as I enjoyed conducting it. Wish you all the very best for that.